It was the sound of the bathroom drawer that caught my attention, not the opening of it, but the way it closed. Too softly, too carefully. I was in the hallway, not quite heading anywhere, just moving like a man without a destination, when I heard that faint click. A whisper of motion behind a closed door. Our bathroom drawers stick. You have to give them a little shove to shut them. But this one closed like it had been guided in silence, like someone didn't want to be heard. I stood there a second longer, listening, but heard nothing else. I walked away, slow, deliberate, and sat at the edge of the bed, not letting the tension show. She came out a few minutes later, wrapped in her towel, hair still damp, phone clutched in her hand, face unreadable. She smiled. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just thinking." She kissed me on the cheek, a soft, routine press of lips that meant nothing, and drifted into the closet. That kiss didn't taste like someone hiding a secret, but it also didn't taste like truth. Later that night, I went into the bathroom. Not to brush my teeth, not to shower. I stood there in the warm fog of her routine, and opened the drawer she'd closed so gently. Nothing unusual. Hairbrush, toothpaste, makeup wipes. But something made me pause. The dental floss box was facing backward. Stupid detail, right? But I'd organized it myself 2 weeks ago, in one of my obsessive fits. I turned all the labels forward, facing out. I remembered it like muscle memory. And now, this one small box had been turned around, placed differently, like it had been picked up and returned by unfamiliar hands. I turned it over. Nothing obvious. But the way it sat nestled at an angle told me more than it should have. That's when the cold started forming in my chest. I didn't confront her. That wasn't my style. I knew that one detail, that tiny moment, wasn't proof of anything. But it was something, like a hairline fracture in a wine glass, subtle, invisible unless you hold it to the light just right, but fatal when pressure builds. And it didn't stop there. Over the next week, I noticed other things. Her phone, suddenly more precious than her wedding ring. Always face down, always with her. Her gym clothes thrown into the hamper inside out, despite her usual neatness. One morning, she left before me. I checked the GPS in her car. It showed a 10-minute detour that didn't align with the route to her yoga studio. The spot she stopped at? A parking lot near a hiking trail. No shops, no cafes, just woods and an overlook. I didn't ask. I simply stared at the red pin on the map and felt that same coldness settle in deeper. The real shift came when her best friend, Rachel, started acting differently. At first, it was subtle, shorter hugs, less eye contact, quicker exits during dinner gatherings. One afternoon, I caught her watching me across the room with a look I couldn't place. Was it pity? Guilt? Fear? I decided to test it. I sent Rachel a message. "Hey, can I talk to you about something? Been feeling like I'm losing her." That was all I wrote. No context. No detail. I didn't even follow up. 2 days later, my wife came home from lunch with Rachel, looking annoyed. She didn't say a word, just tossed her bag on the counter, muttered something about Rachel being too dramatic lately, and went to shower. That night, she didn't touch me, didn't even say goodnight. That's when I knew. I hadn't lost her. She had already left. I was just the last to be informed. I didn't rage. I didn't confront. I simply filed it away, every moment, every word, every tiny clue. Because now, it wasn't about saving anything. It was about understanding how deep the betrayal ran. And if I could understand it, I could use it. I could set the stage. I could make her feel like she was in control, like she was making her own decisions, like the slow collapse of our marriage was her own idea. And when she finally walked out, full of pride and indignation, she'd never suspect she was playing a part I'd written for her long ago. She'd think she won. She'd have no idea the real show hadn't even started yet. Life was quiet before it started unraveling. So quiet that I almost convinced myself the silence was peace. We had our routines. Coffee brewed at 7 a.m. sharp, a kiss on the cheek before work, dinner around 6:30, unless one of us got stuck in traffic. She was always good at the little things, setting out my vitamins, lighting candles before bed, sending me quick texts during the day that said things like, "Thinking of you," or "Don't forget to eat." It felt normal, maybe even enviable. We had a rhythm, one that looked solid from the outside. But that rhythm had a beat I didn't notice at first, a beat that started skipping, changing, like a song you've heard 1,000 times, but suddenly realize has a sour note hidden beneath the melody. It started with the books. She'd always read romance, thrillers, Fluffy stuff she could burn through in a weekend. But then one afternoon, I saw a copy of something different on the nightstand, Women Who Run with the Wolves. I picked it up out of curiosity. The margin was filled with her handwriting. Words like trapped, awakening, selfhood. I didn't think much of it then. Just figured it was part of a new phase, some self-help detour. I even supported it. You finding what you need in that book? I asked her. She nodded without looking at me, just said, yeah, it's making me think about a lot of things. She didn't elaborate. I didn't press. Then came the solo outings. She said she wanted to reconnect with nature, started going on weekend hikes alone. I offered to join. She declined. Said she needed the solitude. She started wearing different clothes, less polished, more earthy. She'd always loved heels, skirts, tight silhouettes. Now it was hiking boots and flowing linen, even when she wasn't going anywhere. One morning I found a pine needle on the passenger seat of her car. She told me she'd gone to that same trail near the lake again. But when I checked the weather that day out of idle curiosity, the area had been under storm warnings. Roads were flooded. I asked her how the trail was. She just said, peaceful. With that same distant smile, she'd started giving me more and more. The kind of smile that seemed rehearsed. Meant for a camera, not for a husband. Her phone changed next. Not visibly, not right away. Just little things. She used to leave it around the house, forgotten in odd places like the bathroom sink or beside the coffee pot. Now it never left her side. Even in the shower, she tucked it inside her towel on the counter. She started using headphones for calls, something she'd never done before. When I came into her room, she'd flip the screen over. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was work. She'd taken on a new freelance project with a startup, something she said required constant communication. But when I asked what the project was, she got vague. Tech stuff. Mostly branding and outreach. I nodded like I understood. I didn't. And she never offered more. Dinner conversations changed too. She used to ask about my day, really ask. Now, she waited for me to finish talking so she could pivot to hers. Not about work. Not about us. About concepts. Things like energy flow, feminine power, detachment. Have you ever felt like parts of you have been sleeping? She asked one night while stirring her pasta absent-mindedly. And now they're starting to wake up? I smiled and said, I think that's called a good night's sleep. She didn't laugh. She didn't even look up. Just said, I don't think you get it. But that's okay. She started talking about boundaries. At first, it was small things, closing the bedroom door when she meditated, asking me not to interrupt her journaling. Then it escalated. I need space, she said one Sunday morning while sipping her tea on the porch. Not from you. Just, in general. She wanted her own room to sleep in sometimes. Just to rest differently. I gave it to her. I moved my things. I even helped her set it up. Fairy lights. Himalayan salt lamp. Books with titles like The Untethered Soul. She thanked me. Kissed my cheek. Called me understanding. But she didn't look me in the eye. The final straw wasn't dramatic. It was a photo. I found it while trying to sync our cloud albums for a digital frame I was setting up as a surprise. The file name was scrambled, tucked into a random folder. It was a selfie, her, standing near a waterfall I didn't recognize, smiling that same distant smile. Her arm was wrapped around someone, just barely visible in the frame. A man. His face was cut off, but his hand rested lightly on her hip. Too familiar to be innocent. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of rage. Not even out of heartbreak. Just realization. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It had always been there, in the shift of her tone, the way she began moving through the house like a guest, the way she called herself we, but never said us. I didn't delete the photo. I didn't confront her. I just backed it up somewhere private. Because now I wasn't trying to stop the fracture. I was waiting for it to widen on its own. Let her keep drifting. Let her keep building her illusion of independence. Let her believe she was the one choosing to leave. I'd already started drawing the map for her exit. She just didn't know she was walking it. It was a Tuesday evening when the mast finally slipped. Nothing unusual about it at first. She told me she was heading to a women's circle that met once a month at a rented studio near downtown. She'd mentioned it before, this gathering of spiritual types who sat in a circle, lit candles, and talked about inner awakenings. I never questioned it. I even encouraged it, played the supportive husband role with just enough warmth to keep her comfortable in the lie. That night, she left at 6:40 p.m. Sharp, dressed in one of those loose, flowy tops she'd been gravitating toward lately, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as always. I watched from the living room window as her taillights disappeared around the corner, my fingers still idly scrolling through a news article I wasn't really reading. Then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the drawer where we kept the keys to the second car, the one she forgot I'd had a spare made from months ago. I didn't rush. There was no pulse in my chest, no heat in my veins. Just a cold, steady hum as I got into the car and pulled out of the driveway 5 minutes after her. I didn't follow directly. I knew her route. I just watched her GPS from the shared car tracking app we used for emergencies. She never turned it off. She never thought I'd look. The address she gave me for the women's circle was a yoga co-op on Willow Street. But her GPS settled somewhere else, a 2-star chain motel off the highway, buried behind a 24-hour diner and a gas station that always looked half shut. I didn't drive all the way to the motel. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest, hoodie pulled over my head, the kind of quiet shadow you'd never glance at twice. I crossed the lot without looking up, but my eyes were working overtime, scanning each parked car. And there it was, our car. Her car, tucked into the far corner, deliberately facing away from the street. I walked past, casual, glanced inside just long enough to see the unmistakable glint of her water bottle and the scarf she always tied to the rearview mirror. Room lights flickered along the front side of the motel. One door slightly ajar. Number 117. I didn't go to the door. I didn't need to. I just stood across the parking lot, watched the curtains move, saw shadows shift. At one point, a man's silhouette crossed in front of the window. He was shirtless. A moment later, I saw her. Her outline. Hair up. Laughing. That laugh. I'd heard it for years. I knew every shade of it. The polite one for company. The breathy one she used when she wanted something. The full-bodied version that came out when she was genuinely happy. But the one I heard through that thin window wasn't meant for me. It was a private kind of joy, and the sound of it punched through the last wall inside me that still held hope. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, locked in place, like someone caught in the stillness right before a storm flattens the earth. Then I turned around and walked back to the car. I didn't speak to her when she came home later that night, just before 10. She slipped inside quietly, her skin freshly washed, hair wet, no trace of incense or candle wax, just the faintest scent of hotel soap and someone else's cologne poorly masked by peppermint oil. The circle ran long, she said with a soft yawn, placing her phone face down on the table. We ended with a group meditation. I feel so grounded. I looked at her from the couch. Glad to hear it, I said, and returned my gaze to the TV screen, where a cooking show played with the volume turned low. She smiled and kissed the top of my head, lingered just long enough to pretend we were still real. I didn't flinch. That night, I lay in bed beside her and counted each breath she took until she fell asleep. Slow, steady, innocent, as if nothing had changed, as if she hadn't just torn through the last of our vows and left the scraps for me to choke on. I didn't sleep. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the past 6 months, rearranging the puzzle pieces, now knowing exactly where they fit. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't confusion. This was treason draped in sage and soft lighting. And in that silence, a switch flipped. Something ancient and final. I wasn't hurt anymore. Hurt is for people still hoping. I was past that. I had no intention of saving her, or saving us, or even confronting her. That would be too easy, too emotional. I wanted her to think she still had control. I wanted her to feel secure, even empowered. I wanted her to dig her own exit path with her bare hands, thinking she was doing it for her freedom. I'd feed her enough rope to wrap around her entire life. And when she stepped off, it wouldn't be me pushing her. She'd think it was her idea all along. Because now I knew what kind of war I was in, and I knew exactly how to win. I became the ghost of my own house. The man in the walls. Always there, never seen. The moment I stood outside that motel, the game changed. I stopped reacting and started calculating. No more assumptions. No more guessing. I needed facts. Proof. Leverage. And most of all, I needed her to keep believing I was in the dark. The next morning, while she sipped her oat milk latte and tapped through her notifications, I casually mentioned I might stop by her office later in the week to drop off lunch. Don't, she said a little too quickly, then caught herself. This week's insane. We're onboarding new clients. I'll barely have time to breathe. I nodded. Of course. I smiled. The next day, I scheduled a courier to deliver a small package to her office, just a book she said she wanted, nothing dramatic. But when the delivery driver called me at 2:13 p.m., he said the receptionist told him she hadn't been in all day. I thanked him and ended the call without a word. That night, she came home glowing. Said the day had been exhausting but productive. I asked if the new client was promising. Very, she said. Startup energy. Disorganized but passionate. Her eyes didn't flicker. Her voice didn't crack. She was good. I just needed to be better. I started checking our joint credit card transactions under the guise of tightening our budget. She'd always left finances to me, so she didn't blink when I brought it up over dinner. I noticed 2 recurring charges at a small cafe 30 minutes from her supposed office, times that didn't match her schedule. I Googled the place. No business meetings were happening there. It was the kind of place with fairy lights and 2-person tables, designed for intimacy, not strategy. I made a note of the dates, matched them to her claimed locations. Lies, each one, said with a casual grace that almost impressed me. But I wasn't angry. I was taking inventory. I then created a fake social media profile, nothing elaborate, just a believable man with vague interests and a few local connections. I used it to message her best friend, Rachel, someone I always suspected was in on it, or at the very least a bystander. The message was simple. Hey, we met briefly at the cafe last week. I was with Eva. Just wanted to say it was nice to meet you. Hope you're doing well. She replied 2 hours later. Sorry, I think you've got the wrong person. I haven't seen Eva in ages. I stared at that message for a long time. There it was. The fracture line, clear and wide. Rachel had been the alibi more than once. Next, I took a day off without telling her. I waited until she left the house in her yoga gear, claiming she was headed to a new meditation class. I gave her a 20-minute head start, then drove the long way around and followed her from a block away. She didn't go to the studio. She drove straight to that same motel, room 117 again. I parked across the lot, lowered the seat, and waited. An hour later, a man pulled up. Mid-30s, expensive haircut, the kind of man who spends more time on his skincare than his taxes. She opened the door for him with a smile I hadn't seen in a year. That was all I needed. I didn't take photos. I didn't need to. I already had access to her cloud. She'd never revoked my admin rights when I set up her phone years ago. That night, while she showered, I mirrored her phone screen to my computer, something she'd never notice. I didn't even have to dig far. The text thread with his number wasn't labeled with a name. Just a heart emoji. Messages going back months. Photos. Audio clips. A short video of her dancing in a hotel robe while he laughed in the background. I studied it like a surgeon. Not for emotion. For structure. I wanted to know how she lied. How she layered the deceit. I wanted to map her psychology, where she felt safe, when she dropped her guard. She talked to him about leaving me. Not soon, but eventually. She said I'd be fine, that I was strong but a little numb. She didn't even hate me. She just didn't think I mattered anymore. I started laying my traps. I asked about her next women's circle meeting, offered to drive her. She looked startled. You don't have to do that, she said. I like the drive. I said nothing, just smiled. I marked that date on the calendar. I changed our joint account password the day before. She wouldn't notice. I kept a dummy balance in the shared account, but all the real money was now in a private trust under my name only. I began transferring property titles quietly, perfectly legally, all above board. She'd signed half the forms over the years without reading them. Every document I had her sign from now on, I buried beneath layers of tax stuff and insurance forms. I asked her if she wanted to go away for a weekend soon, rekindle things, maybe. She agreed, cautiously. Said she'd think about it. Said she appreciated the effort. That word, effort, sat on her tongue like dust. She thought she was managing me. She thought I was grasping. She thought I was weak. And every day she smiled that distant, pitying smile. I smiled back like a mirror. Because I wasn't fighting for the marriage anymore. I was collecting her footprints on the way out of the maze. She was already lost. She just didn't know she was walking in circles, ones I had drawn in the dirt long before she ever stepped into them. I chose her birthday, not because I wanted to ruin it, but because I wanted her to remember. I reserved the private back room at a quiet, upscale restaurant she loved, one of those low-lit places with velvet chairs and minimalist plates where everything feels intimate and composed. I told her it would be just the two of us, a celebration, a reset. She arrived glowing, wrapped in a soft burgundy dress that clung just right, heels clicking like she was performing for invisible cameras. She kissed my cheek and smiled with a kind of rehearsed gratitude, the kind you give someone you're placating. I pulled out her chair. We ordered wine. We talked like old friends, civil, smooth, surface level. I told her she looked beautiful. She said I was being sweet. I waited until after the dessert came, something rich and gold-dusted. One of those things you only pretend to eat. That's when the server wheeled in the cake I'd arranged. Not a real cake, but a box designed to look like one, on a silver platter, tied with a red ribbon. What's this? She laughed, already tipsy. Something sweet, I said. She untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, and froze. Inside was a stack of printed screenshots, color-coded, time-stamped. Messages. Photos. A booking confirmation for room 117. A selfie she sent him from my car. One of them shirtless, brushing his teeth in the motel mirror. Her hand visible in the corner, holding the phone. Her laugh died in her throat. The restaurant seemed to grow quieter, like it, too, was listening. She didn't speak at first. Just stared. Then the denial came. What is this? Where did you get this? This isn't what it looks like. Her voice was strained but low, trying not to draw attention. I didn't move. You think spying on me is normal? She added quickly, shifting into indignation. Everyone has secrets. This is a violation. I raised a hand, just one, and she went silent. Then came the justification. It was emotional. Mostly emotional. I was confused. You've been so distant. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I didn't even mean for it to happen. It just did. We didn't plan this. Her fingers fumbled with the edge of the ribbon like she could rewind the scene if she just pulled the right thread. You never noticed me, she said, voice shaking. You've been elsewhere for so long. I felt invisible. Then the guilt shifting. Maybe if you had touched me more. Maybe if you asked how I was. Maybe if you stopped making me feel like I was a guest in my own life. She looked at me like I owed her something. Like betrayal was a reasonable response to my stability. And then mocking confidence. A final desperate reach for control. You're acting like a victim, but you're not perfect. You think this makes you powerful? You think catching me in a mistake gives you the upper hand? You don't even know what you want. You've been coasting through this marriage like a ghost. Maybe I gave up before you did. Her voice had gained strength, but her hands were trembling. That's when I leaned in, calmly, and said the only sentence I'd rehearsed for weeks. No, Eva, I didn't catch you in a mistake. I let it settle. Let her process the weight. I built the room you cheated in, I continued. I paid for the bed. I held the door open. And then I waited for you to walk through it. She didn't speak. Her face cracked in slow motion. Confusion first, then a sick recognition that I had known far longer than she thought. That this wasn't discovery. This was execution. Her lip quivered. Her gaze darted around the room, realizing no one was looking, no one cared, no one would save her. What do you mean? She whispered. You knew. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She leaned back slowly, like gravity had shifted under her. So this whole night, she started, then trailed off, the realization tightening around her throat like a rope. You planned this, she said, more to herself than me. I met her eyes and held them. Not angry. Not broken. Just absolute. She tried to stand, then sat back down. Her legs didn't trust her. I folded the lid of the box back over the stack of her sins and slid it across the table toward her. Happy birthday, I said, my voice quiet but immovable. You finally get everything you wanted. And I didn't get up. I didn't storm out. I let the silence stretch like wire between us, taut and dangerous. Because this wasn't the end. This was the pause before the next move. And I wanted her to sit in it, to feel the cold hands of inevitability closing around her neck. She followed me out of the restaurant like a shadow that had lost its body, heels snapping against the pavement, breath uneven, eyes wild. You think this is strength? She hissed behind me. You think being cold makes you powerful? I didn't answer. I unlocked the car, opened the door, got in. She yanked it open before I could close it. You're not strong, you're just empty. You've always been empty. You stand there like some statue expecting a medal for not reacting. Say something. Her voice cracked, raw and breathless. I looked at her, calm and utterly detached. You're not worth raising my voice for. The words landed like a blade across her ribs. She staggered back a half step. So what now? She snapped, voice rising again. You're going to play the victim? Pretend like you didn't have a part in this? You think I wanted this? I tried. I begged you for attention, for intimacy, for anything real. But you were always so damn distant. You think this is all my fault? You smothered me. With your silence. With your routines. With your rules. She was trembling now, pacing on the sidewalk like a storm looking for something to destroy. I needed to breathe. To live. I was dying in that house, and God, you didn't even notice. I didn't blink. You didn't suffocate. You slipped out quietly and locked the door behind you. Her eyes darted, searching my face for a crack, a flicker of pain, a glimpse of the man she thought she could manipulate. You were boring, she spat suddenly, her voice now venomous. Predictable. Robotic. No passion. No chaos. Just spreadsheets and grocery lists. I needed something real. He made me feel alive. Like a woman again. You stopped doing that a long time ago. I gave her nothing. Just stared with that quiet, unshakable stare that made her rage spin back in on itself. This wouldn't have happened if you were a real man, she screamed, stepping closer, close enough to strike if I'd been weak enough to flinch. I didn't. No, I said slowly. It wouldn't have happened if you were a decent woman. She froze. The street went quiet. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For a moment, the night swallowed both of us. Then she laughed, high, manic, desperate. You've always been like this, she said, voice low now, trembling with bitterness. Always playing the calm one. Like you're above everything. But you're not. You're just a coward who can't feel. You think this makes you righteous? It makes you pathetic. You're pathetic. I tilted my head slightly. Then why are you the one begging a pathetic man for validation? That stopped her. It didn't silence her, but it collapsed something behind her eyes. Her mouth pressed shut, her chin quivered. And then came the tears. I made a mistake, she whispered. I lost myself. I didn't know what I was doing. I was confused. Please. We can fix this. We can talk. You don't have to throw everything away over a stupid mistake. You've made mistakes too, haven't you? She reached for my arm. I stepped back like she was something diseased. I didn't set fire to the house and call it self-discovery. Her face contorted, grief and rage and panic all colliding at once. You don't mean this. You don't want to lose me. You love me. I shook my head slowly. I did. Before I met the version of you that could look me in the eyes and lie for 6 months straight. Her hands clenched at her sides. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. Then why did you keep going after the first time? I asked. No anger. Just precision. Her breath hitched. She had no answer. Just silence. Please, she said finally, quieter now, broken. Please don't do this. I opened the car door again and sat down. I'm not doing anything, I said as I started the engine. You did this. I just watched. I didn't slam the door. I didn't peel out. I just drove away, smooth and steady, as she stood on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around herself like she was realizing for the first time how cold the world could be when no one's waiting inside. She thought she could manipulate her way out, cry her way back in, twist guilt like a weapon the way she had all along. But I wasn't there anymore. She wasn't speaking to a man hoping to save the marriage. She was speaking to a man who'd already buried it and carved her name into the headstone. She thought the worst had passed. That dinner, that moment, that confrontation, she thought it was the climax. She walked around the house a little quieter, offered small apologies in the form of folded laundry and warm meals, like penance could be served in domestic offerings. But I wasn't there for any of it, not really. I was already gone, already in motion, already building the quiet avalanche she wouldn't see until it was thundering down the mountain. First, I collected. Everything. Every message, every photo, every lie. I backed up her cloud, mirrored her phone for the last time, downloaded every scrap of proof she left lying around like confetti from a celebration she thought would never end. I printed it all, organized, indexed, cataloged. I created a private folder, password protected, on a cleaned USB drive. Then I closed the accounts. The joint one was first. I drained the funds, moved everything into a separate trust under my name only, which I'd established months earlier when the signs began. I left just enough in the original account for her to believe nothing had changed. Credit cards were canceled and reissued with limits set to 0. Utilities? Transferred. The car? That too. I'd paid for it, titled it under my name, and filed for a lien before she ever thought to check. She still drove it daily, still parked it like it belonged to her. That wouldn't last. Next came the job. She'd told me his name once, her affair partner, bragged about his ambition during one of her slips in a post-yoga haze. Turns out he wasn't just her little secret. He was also on probation with his company for an HR violation 2 years back. A few discreet emails later, sent from an anonymous account, their exchanges, explicit, timestamped, geotagged in office parking lots and off-site meetups, landed in the inbox of his department head. I didn't attach a name. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. As for her, I called her supervisor, under the pretense of updating my emergency contact after our pending divorce, and in the most polite tone, I explained that my wife might be using company time for personal affairs. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. I let silence do the rest. HR doesn't ignore quiet men who speak calmly about compliance breaches. They dig. They always dig. Then, I made it personal. Her family adored me. Her father once told me I was the first man she brought home who felt like he had a spine. So I invited them to lunch. Just me and them. Neutral ground. I brought the folder. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply laid it all out, dates, photos, transcripts. Her mother cried. Her father sat still for a long time, staring at the timeline like it was a police report. I didn't ask them to pick sides. I didn't need to. I just said, if she comes to you crying, just remember she didn't trip. She jumped. They nodded. They understood. I called my lawyer next. Papers were filed before she even knew I'd made the call. We had no kids. No real debts. The house? Bought with my inheritance before we were married. Protected. I served her the papers through a courier while she was at a hair appointment. She had just posted a boomerang of herself sipping coffee under a dryer. I watched it, then waited. 10 minutes later, she texted me. What is this? I didn't reply. That same afternoon, the locks changed. She still had a key, of course, but the deadbolt was new. I waited for her to find out on her own. That night, she showed up, mascara smeared, wearing an apology-like perfume. I opened the door halfway. This isn't your home anymore, I said, voice flat. She begged, whispered, cursed, bargained. I never raised mine. Finally, I made the last move. The perfect one. I posted a single message on my private account. Just a photo of the sunset, captioned, "Freedom tastes like silence." Within an hour, friends started texting her. Within 2, our mutuals stopped responding to her stories. A few clicked, unfollow. I hadn't spoken ill of her. I hadn't posted proof. But the whisper was already moving, because I'd sent the USBs to 3 trusted friends, told them not to share unless asked. But people ask. They always ask. The silence is more damning than outrage. She tried to call me. 10 times. Then she tried calling them. Her voicemails became more desperate. You're ruining my life, she said on the last one. No. She did that herself. I just held up the mirror. And still, she thought she had time. Time to fix it. Time to crawl back. Time to convince someone, anyone, that she was misunderstood. But I was already gone. I was a phantom pulling levers from behind a curtain she never thought to look behind. Every move she made, every lie she'd built her little fantasy on, I turned them into the architecture of her collapse. The beauty of it was that there was no explosion. Just gravity. Just inevitability. Just a quiet, unrelenting dismantling. She thought I'd be angry. She expected war. She never imagined I'd win it before the first shot was fired. It happened at her sister's engagement party, a glittering evening wrapped in fairy lights and soft jazz, held at the same country estate where we were married, back when her smile was still real and not a mask she wore to keep her secrets from bleeding through. I was invited because I'd remained family to everyone but her. Her parents had asked me personally to attend, said it would mean a lot to have me there. They didn't say it with pity. They said it with quiet resolution, with the same eyes that had stared at the folder of evidence I handed them weeks before. She didn't know I'd be there, not until she walked into the courtyard wearing a sea green dress and found me standing beside her father, drink in hand, calm as a surgeon. I watched her flinch when she saw me, just a flicker, a single frame of a film reel, but it was there. She tried to recover, smiled, nodded, walked toward the crowd like she hadn't seen a ghost, like the ground wasn't about to collapse beneath her feet. She made her rounds, kissed cheeks, laughed a little too loud at safe jokes, but her eyes kept darting back to me like I was a ticking clock only she could hear. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. The guests were already whispering soft glances, hushed tones, shifting glances. It was slow at first. One friend excused herself from a conversation when Eva approached. Another pretended not to hear her greeting. Her cousin, once inseparable, looked right through her. It spread like fire through dry brush, evidence whispered from phone to phone, screenshots passed behind wine glasses, lips mouthing, "Is this real?" And she did all that, with disbelief curling at the corners of every mouth. She tried to act unfazed, made small talk, even joked. Everyone's so serious tonight, she said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. But her voice cracked on the last word. Her sister didn't smile back. Maybe they finally see you for who you are, she said, then turned and walked away, leaving Eva standing alone by the cake table. Her face stiffened. She scanned the room, desperate to find an anchor, someone, anyone, who'd still meet her gaze without flinching. That's when she spotted Rachel, her old best friend, the keeper of her secrets, the girl who used to lie for her on cue. But Rachel didn't hug her this time. She didn't even stand. She looked up from her seat beside me, eyes cold, and said one sentence with the force of a guillotine. You used me. Eva's breath caught. Rachel, please, she whispered, reaching out. Rachel stood up, stepped back. No, don't. Then she walked past her without another word, her silence heavier than any scream. The final blow came less than 5 minutes later. Her lover arrived. Yes, he was invited too. Through some string of mutual connections, he'd shown up, clearly unaware of what had been unleashed. The moment their eyes met, panic overtook her face. She crossed the room quickly, whispered something urgent. He didn't respond. She reached for his arm, he stepped back. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the exchange. Saw his lips tighten, his brow furrow, his mouth form one sentence before he turned and walked out the way he came. She stood frozen, her hands still in the air, like the rejection hadn't registered. Slowly, she turned, the party now utterly silent around her. No music. No laughter. Just the soft clink of a glass set down too hard, and the rustle of shame moving through a crowd like wind through trees. She looked at me. Finally. Across the room, through a dozen eyes now watching her unravel. Our gazes locked. She tried to smile again, but her lip trembled. You did this, she mouthed, her voice too weak to carry. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't say a word. Just watched. That's what broke her. Not the whispers. Not the shame. Not the collapsing house of lies. It was the way I stood still, unmoved, unbothered, untouched. She staggered, just slightly, as if gravity had shifted without warning. Someone tried to guide her to a seat. She shrugged them off. Her breath was coming in shallow bursts now, her mascara running. She looked around, one last desperate sweep for a lifeline. None came. She was alone in a room full of people she used to control. I let her stand there in the ruins. Let her feel every eye on her. Let her understand the weight of being seen, finally seen, without the layers of charm, manipulation, and false smiles. I didn't need revenge speeches. I didn't need drama. I just needed her to live in that moment long enough to know she would never forget it. And as she stood trembling, surrounded by the silence of her own consequences, she saw me watching. Still. Unmoving. Unforgiving. And that was enough. It happened 3 days after the party, her last shred of reputation still dangling by a thread she hadn't realized was already cut. She showed up uninvited to her father's retirement dinner, held at a quiet but elegant banquet hall filled with extended family, colleagues, old friends, people who knew her as the golden daughter, the one with the charm and the perfect smile. I was there because her parents asked me to be. Said it would mean more to them than she'd ever understand. She walked in late, wearing the same desperate confidence she tried to wear at the engagement party, but it was thinner now, fraying at the edges. She scanned the room, pretending not to see the cold stares, the tight lips, the forced nods of acknowledgement. Her mother looked away. Her father's jaw clenched. I was at the head table, talking quietly with her uncle when she approached, heels clicking faster than usual, face tight with forced elegance. You've had your moment, she hissed through a brittle smile, leaning down toward me. Now let it go. I didn't move. You don't get to walk into someone else's dinner and act like you're owed anything, I said calmly, just loud enough for those around us to hear. That was enough to crack her. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She snapped, her voice rising. Heads began to turn. You humiliated me in front of my family, my friends. You've made me look like a monster when all I ever wanted was to be loved. That word, loved, rang hollow, a child's excuse wrapped in adult venom. I stood up slowly. The room quieted. Loved. I repeated. Is that what it was when you were on your back in a 2-star motel while texting me you were at yoga? Gasps erupted like sparks in dry grass. Her mother covered her mouth. Her cousin dropped a fork. Eva's face twisted. You think this is justice? She spat, eyes wide, frantic now. You're not some noble victim. You're vindictive. You're bitter because I stopped pretending you were enough. My brother stood then, ready to intervene, but I raised a hand to stop him. No, I said. Let her talk. Let her say everything. She's already burned the house down, might as well dance in the ashes. That lit a fuse. I gave you everything. She shouted, her voice cracking shrill. I stayed when you got boring. When you stopped touching me. When all you ever cared about was your perfect little routines. I kept us alive, and this is how you thank me. You didn't keep us alive, I said, voice sharp. You kept me asleep. And when I woke up, I realized I'd been living with a stranger who smiles like a saint and stabs like a thief. She laughed, high and broken, desperate to appear unfazed. You think you're so righteous, she barked. You think people are on your side because you're quiet and composed. But they don't know you like I do. They don't know how cold you are, how dead inside you've always been. And yet I'm not the one who had to open my legs to feel alive, I said. The room erupted. A plate shattered. Someone stood between us, but I waved them off again. Go ahead, I said. Tell them all how I made you do it. Tell them how my silence forced your lies. Tell them how every betrayal was my fault because I didn't worship you the way you did. She turned red, then pale, then red again. You want to be the hero? She snarled. Go ahead. But you're still alone. No, her father said suddenly, voice low and stern. You are. She spun to him, shocked. Dad, don't, he cut in. I saw the messages. I saw the photos. I saw you. This man stood by you when you didn't deserve it. And now he's done standing. She looked around the room like a drowning woman searching for a hand, but every face was either downcast or locked in disappointment. Her affair partner stood by the bar, visibly uncomfortable, trying to vanish behind a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. You think you're all better than me? She shrieked. You think anyone here is perfect? You're all just pretending. Her voice echoed too loud, too long. She realized it, too. The room had turned to ice. I stepped forward, close enough for only her to hear. This isn't about perfection, I said. It's about principle. And yours died the moment you started lying with his name in your mouth and mine in your home. Her lips trembled. You loved me once. I nodded. And now I love the silence more. I turned, walked back to the head table, sat down beside her father, who placed a hand on my shoulder and said nothing, but everything was already said. Behind me, I heard her breath hitch. Her heels faltered. She didn't scream again. She didn't throw anything. She just stood there, alone, in the house of her own undoing. And everyone saw it. And no one moved to save her. After it all came crashing down, the world didn't explode for her. It just got quieter. Slowly. Brutally. Her company didn't fire her outright. They just stopped giving her projects. The emails slowed. Her team stopped looping her in. Then HR called her in for a discussion. And after that, the polite distance became a permanent exit. The man she threw it all away for? Gone within a week. Ghosted her the moment the story spread, deleted his accounts, moved jobs. Left no trace except the memory she couldn't brag about anymore. She tried to reach out to friends, but messages sat on read. Her name vanished from group chats. The brunch group? Blocked her. Rachel? Never responded. Her family didn't cut her off completely. They just stopped answering on the first ring. Invitations were no longer addressed to her. She wasn't disowned. She was erased. Quietly. Efficiently. Like someone you mourned but didn't bury. I didn't hear from her at first. Just silence. Then the emails came. One-word apologies. Then long ones. Pages of rambling confessions mixed with blame and regret like oil and water. One said, I miss the way you used to look at me. Another, I didn't know what I had until it was gone. I never replied. Eventually, she started sending voicemails, sobbing, broken, unhinged, telling me she wasn't sleeping, that she saw my face in her dreams, that she'd take it all back if she could, that she'd undo every lie if I just gave her one more chance. She even showed up to my door once. It was raining. She looked smaller. Makeup running, hair a mess, the kind of disarray that wasn't for drama. It was real this time. The mask was gone. She stood there shivering, drenched in everything she had destroyed, clutching a box of old photos and crying like the girl I once loved had come back from the grave. Please, she whispered. Please don't hate me. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was lost. I was scared. I thought you didn't care anymore. I looked at her for a long time. And I'll admit, for just one breath, I felt something flicker. Not love. Not sadness. Just the ghost of the man I used to be when she still meant something. But then I remembered the motel. The messages. The lies told with calm eyes and a steady voice while she curled up in my bed and told me she loved me. I stepped outside, stood just close enough for her to think I might reach for her. She smiled through tears, hope breaking through the ruin. Then I said it. You burned down our house for a matchstick in the dark. And now you're asking me to build it again with ashes in your hands. She broke. Right there on the porch. Collapsed to her knees, crying like she thought the sound might change something. It didn't. I stepped back inside, closed the door, and never looked back. She moved 2 towns over now, I heard. Working retail under a different name. Pretends to be someone new. But you can still see the wreckage in her eyes if you know where to look. And sometimes, late at night, I still get the occasional text from an unblocked number. Just 3 words. I still love you. I never reply. She doesn't exist to me anymore. Just a ghost of a life I buried while she was busy digging someone else's grave. If you're listening to this, wondering if I regret it, no? I regret trusting someone who smiled with her mouth while lying with her hands. But revenge? No, that was never revenge. It was justice. Slow, sharp, deserved. And if you think I went too far, ask yourself this. What would you have done if it was your wife?